The argument from design. You're probably familiar with the argument for the existence of God that says the universe is so evidently designed that it must in fact have an intelligent designer. In 1802, William Paley sought to demonstrate this as follows. The argument runs briefly like this. If I'm walking across a field and my foot hits a stone and someone asks me where the stone came from, I might well answer that for all I know, it's been there forever. If, however, I come across a watch, I can't give the same answer, because when I look closely at the watch, I see that all its parts fit together so well to create precisely this particular motion. If the parts were of any other shape or fit together in any other way, the watch wouldn't work. I therefore conclude that the watch was designed and built by an intelligent agent. So, of course, this is intended to be an analogy for the known universe. It's put together so well, all the pieces work together so perfectly, that it must have been designed, just as this watch was. Of course, this idea was not new with William Paley. Thomas Aquinas, for instance, stated it centuries earlier in a somewhat more formal manner. But his argument, too, was based on the concept of order. Now, there are a number of problems with this analogy. First of all, we have no other universes to compare this one with. We recognise that the watch is intelligently designed because we've seen other watches, and we've seen other things that are designed and things that are not apparently so designed. It's not clear to me that if a Kalahari bushman picked up this watch, he would see it as designed. But we only know this universe, and only part of it at that. So we don't actually know if this universe works particularly well or not. There may be, in theory, much better universes. This one may not work particularly well at all. We also know the purpose of the watch, to tell the time, but we don't know the purpose of the universe, if there is one. So we don't know how well the universe actually fulfills this purpose. The argument is obviously based on the supposed observation that the universe is as well designed and fulfills its purpose as well as this watch does. However, there are plenty of random things in the universe that seem to serve no purpose at all, like stones that I might accidentally kick in the field. The universe is, in fact, full of seemingly random events, actually random if quantum physics is correct, which don't seem to be designed or serve any clear purpose in any such design. It's no good claiming that they do, in fact, serve a purpose, and that we just don't know what that purpose is yet, because we're actually claiming to be able to see such a design in the universe. And then, when we see something that doesn't fit that, we claim that it secretly does. So we explain away discrepancies quite arbitrarily. There are plenty of examples in nature that, from a strictly engineering point of view, are not very well designed. They would, in fact, work much better and more efficiently were we to have designed them. For instance, in the human body there's something called the recurrent laryngeal nerve, seen in purple here. It makes a completely unnecessary loop around the aorta. Were we to actually design this, it wouldn't make that loop. It doesn't serve a purpose, it's just the way the system has evolved over time. It is, again, no good claiming that it serves some secret purpose, because you can't at the same time claim that the universe is designed, but then point to something within it that doesn't seem to be designed and claim that it must be because the universe is designed. This is an entirely circular argument. Another point concerns entropy. In case you don't know, the second law of thermodynamics states briefly that heat always flows spontaneously from hotter to colder regions of matter, or downhill in terms of the temperature gradient. This establishes the concept of entropy, namely that entropy, essentially disorder, cannot decrease spontaneously over time in an isolated system. The example often given is something like this. You can observe an egg falling from the table to the floor and smashing, but you can never observe a smashed egg putting itself back together and rising from the floor onto the table. We can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Any isolated system always undergoes an increase in entropy or disorder. It becomes more disordered. Note that this refers to an isolated system, and so far as we know, the universe is an isolated system. So overall entropy increases in the universe. The universe is winding down, it's becoming less ordered. However, when a local system is open to a source of energy from outside, entropy can decrease locally, which is what we see, in fact, on Earth, for instance. Energy from the sun allows entropy to decrease locally, and thus we have ordered structures like the Earth itself and our cells. And we can locally reduce entropy by making such things as watches. But, of course, this is based on only a small sample of the universe. Order only occurs in local pockets, like galaxies. Overall, the universe is not very ordered at all. So you can't draw any universal conclusions about the nature of the universe from local observations of one of the few exceptions. The argument from design often points to the laws of the universe itself. The argument runs something like this. The laws of the universe and the particles that make it up and the constants that describe it all work so well together that it simply must have been designed like our watch. Again, there are several things wrong with this argument. First, even granting that it's correct, it only serves to support a deistic version of God. God sets the parameters, he pushes the button and sets the universe running. It then presumably runs on its own. Were God required to intervene at any point, this would presumably indicate that something had gone wrong in the design. And if God does indeed intervene, that would already undermine the argument from design, because that bit, the bit that God has to adjust, can't be used to support the design argument. This would, it seems to me, include the entire Judeo-Christian narrative, according to which something has clearly gone wrong. So, if we actually live in a world that has gone wrong, how can we possibly point to it as evidence of design? The argument from design could only appeal to the pre-fall universe, which we clearly can't observe. So, the argument from design is, in this tradition at least, based on the existence of a perfect world which we can't actually observe because it no longer exists. So we can't claim to observe this design in this universe. Even if we ignore this fallen aspect, though, and assume that the universe works the way it always did, we still can't argue that this universe is well designed because, again, we have no point of comparison. Maybe there are much better designs with much better laws and better particles and constants and so on that would work much better than this one. We simply can't know. The 18th century German philosopher Gottfried Leibniz, who was Isaac Newton's rival in the claim to have first formulated calculus, he argues that, despite its apparent evils, this is the best world that God could possibly have created. Basically, the argument goes that God is omnipotent and he could have created all kinds of worlds. But he's also omniscient and could therefore foresee which of these possibilities was the best. And this was it. I'm not sure this is really even an argument. First of all, it seems to imply a fairly restricted concept of omnipotence. It seems that God's power is in fact limited, and therefore not omni, by certain external possibilities. Secondly, of course, as I've already made abundantly clear, we do not, and actually cannot, know if this is the best of all possible worlds. Now, Leibniz is not using this argument to prove the existence of God. Rather, he's using it to explain the presence of evil and suffering in the world. Given the options available to God, Leibniz is saying this is the best that God could possibly do. However, you can see how this undermines the argument from design, and from within the same rationalistic Enlightenment framework, in fact. We look at the world and see that it is in fact far from perfect. It's deeply flawed. So this must be the best God could do. But we can't then argue back in the next breath from a perfectly designed world to God as its designer. We've already acknowledged that it isn't perfectly designed, it's deeply flawed. And anyway, it seems to me it doesn't work anywhere near as well as our watch.